Hey there. So I've been thinking about this for a little while as to how to teach people how to play chess, right? I do this all the time, and I teach players from all walks of life, literally from age 3 to age 87. And and someone new will come in and I want to teach them how to play. So I'll just pull out a rook and I kind of go in order through these pieces, a certain order that I like to show them. And I just wanted to share it with you. So either you're trying to teach people chess and hopefully you'll find this useful because you might be thinking, hey, which piece should I start with? How should I explain it? Or maybe you're learning for the first time, in which case you can also teach people using these methods if you like them, because we pay it forward, right? Pay it forward, circle of mentorship. But first, let me show you how I do this. So I'll pretty much break it down like I'm talking to a teacher. So I'm teaching another coach how to teach, hopefully, or maybe you could tell me some things too that will work for you. Circle of chess knowledge, right? So we look at the rook and say, okay, so the rook moves in 4 directions, right? And you can say, actually, someone in the back of an airplane once told me, they're like, oh, I took a chess class. We learned a song called Front, Back, Side to Side. And every single piece had a song, which I thought was cool. So I'll use that front, back, side to side. And the arrows go straight, just like the rook is shaped. So really the theme here is we're going to talk about how the pieces are shaped. That's kind of the hack, because I noticed that every single piece is pretty much shaped like how it moves. We'll go through that. So the rook is boxy and it moves straight. Then I'll usually switch between black and white pieces. So we have a black rook, and then I'll pull out a bishop. And of course, we're going to review everything, right? So then I pull out a bishop. Now, hopefully this is a somewhat standard looking bishop because it has a diagonal cut in it. Now I'm talking about a physical set like in a library, right? So we have a bishop that has a diagonal cut, and you see it looks kind of triangular, right? So this one moves. What do you think? And then they can guess diagonally. See, so we have one bishop that's on dark squares and one that's on light squares. So I might stick them next to each other just to show them, but pretty much I'll just show them this. And again, we're going to come back to it. We're going to review. And then I pull out the queen. I say, okay, well, the queen is a combination of the bishop and the rook. So, right, we have a bishop and a rook, right? Bishop and rook. And so it can do everything. It's the most powerful piece. And you could talk about how she was super, although I still want to find out, but talk about how she has these superpowers that she inherited, I think in the 15th century, or was the 14th? I'm not exactly sure because I know she used to be a general. So maybe you chess history buffs can tell me about that. But I'll kind of talk about how she gained these superpowers and she used to just be a general that was very weak. And then the king, we get to the king next. Oh, by the way, I'll talk about rays of sun. And you can see these little spokes kind of like when you take out a 3D piece, you'll see all these little dots. They're aiming in every direction. And I say, look, it's like rays of sun or laser beams shooting in every direction as far as they can go till they hit something, right? So queen, rays of sun. Whereas the king, now he doesn't really look like how he moves, but we just remember he's a weaker version of the queen. Now the king, that's the game. So you lose the king, you lose the game, but he doesn't get to be as powerful as his queen. And he moves more like a force field or halo. It's like he has a force field or halo around him. So he can only go one. Also, every direction like the queen, right? It could be like northeast, southwest, east, west, every direction, but only one at a time. So recall, I'm not going to get into castling and stuff like that. Just the basic piece movement. Okay. And then we look at a knight. Now the knight moves like an L. So I'm pretty much saying if you look at it, if you flip, well, if you make a line through it, you have to flip it upside down. And you say, hey, look, and that one looks like an L, right? And you're always going to go 2 and 1. And I'll use that. Well, Gotham chess, that one's useful. He says gallop, gallop, turn. Once in a while, I'll borrow from that one, gallop, gallop, turn. Or just say 2 and 1. And they, people get it, right? Say make an L. Like for kids in my joke, I'm like, nope, not a huge L. Can't go all the way across. That's the camel, right? There's a camel that does that in a variant, if they know about that. So, for those in the know. But regular knights, horses, you're like, wait, why is it called a knight? In Spanish, it's called a caballo, which is a horse. I think in Portuguese they call it cavalo, which is also horse. But in chess we call it a knight. So like there may as well be a knight riding in the back. But to say no, we just call it's a horse, right? But we call it a knight. So anyway, there's this thing galloping around and it goes 2 and 1. And remember, it always changes colors. Then you could say, remember how the bishop stayed on its own color. The knight, remember, it has to change colors. So it's going to go 2 and 1, make an L in any direction it wants, kind of like Tetris. So I kind of like make different analogies. It depends on the person, obviously. Some people, it just depends on the person, how we're communicating, how much they're picking it up, and trying to make analogies and stuff, But basically, knight moves like an L. So again, the shape, and then we get on to the pawns. So we say, the pawns seem like the simplest, but actually I think they're the most complex. So we save them for last. And that's partially why I wanted to show this, because I think some people would probably show the pawns first. But then you start getting into like, oh, well, it can go 2 or 1, you go diagonal. It's like, okay, that's kind of complicated. And I'm not going to get into en passants and all. No, we're just going to keep it simple, right? We're going to do that last to say, okay, this is the most complicated. We're going to get this one down. Once you got that down, you know how to play chess. And then, of course, I review and I quiz them real quick, make sure that they have it down. So the pawn goes 2 or 1 on the first move. So I say it's kind of like I said, the queen is like superpowers. So I say it's turbocharged. The pawn is turbocharged. It can use its turbocharge or supercharge if it wants on the first move, and it can go twice, right? It can also go once. It's the pawn's choice. So take here, you go 2 or 1. So it's going to march down the board, boop, boop, 1 at a time after the first move, right? The 1 on a time. And when it reaches the end, it becomes a queen. It can promote to whatever it wants, but usually get a queen because she's the most powerful, right? So and then I might say, oh, it's kind of like in checkers. In checkers, what do you do when you get to the end? You say king me, right? Well, in chess, you basically say queen me, right? You get a new queen. And then they might ask about how many. You say, oh, technically, how many think you can have? If they can all become queens, then they're like, oh, it's actually 9, right? They'll realize it's 9 because you can have your original queen plus 8 pawns that can promote. So anyway, they all become queens. So it's like, then you might talk about the queen of Katwe, how someone's teaching Fiona chess, and she says how the littlest one, the little one becomes the biggest one, and then she calls it the president, right? The king. Oh no, that's the king rather, but the strongest one, right? Littlest one becomes the biggest one. So she's like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? Power, and then talk about there's power in numbers, but they seem simple, but they have little tricks. Like for example, they're the only one that captures differently from the way it first moves, right? So they move. Let's say you take the white pawn, you move twice, and then black moves twice. Now, if it's white's move, they can capture diagonally. And then, of course, you'll have them practice capturing. Sometimes I'll introduce that sooner than on earlier moves too, but just to kind of have them play around with it. Definitely I'll let them interact early on. So we should capture diagonally, and then that's your square. And I say, okay, you take it, that's your square. Because usually people at first are kind of like, should I knock it off the board? Should they both go away? Like, nope, you move the pawn here. Let's say black goes like this, and white goes like this. Now they're facing off. And then take. And one of my students said, so I just borrow things, right? So one of my students said, when I'm blocked, I'm locked. So I say, oh yeah, my student mentioned that. I like it. You're locked up this way. You're like a brick wall. Can't do anything. And then if you're like this diagonally, you can take each other. You can choose to pass on. Keep going, right? Okay, so then I say, let's review. And then, and again, this is, if you really want to just get to the point, you can just walk through it and be like, okay, look. So we have a rook, front, back, side to side, right? Rook goes straight. And you'll just ask them the question. They'll remember, right? And then you can take another rook. You could be like, okay, if it's black to move, what can they do? Can they take? Yeah. You can be like, here, let's take a bishop. What if it's here? Can the rook take the bishop? No, the bishop would take the rook, right? So you can play around with that. And then you take the bishop, right? Say, how does that one move again? Diagonal cut, right? Remember? Okay, that one goes diagonally. You take another one, right? And they work, and you can mention like little strat. You can get into strategy too, like, oh, look at how well they work together, right? And we'll talk about that later on too, as we get into like middle game strategy. But yeah, you can just see they're really great together. And but remember, the concept is you can get into some math also. Say, hey, they cover 64 squares, right? Together, each one. What's 8 times? Maybe with kids, we're like, I'll teach them. I don't care if they're 5 or like 7, whatever. What's 8 times 8? 64. We have 64 squares. But especially if they're like 10 or something, well, they're going to learn division today, right? So say, okay, 64 divided by 2. 32. So say this one covers 32 squares, 32 light squares, 32 dark squares. So you kind of play around with that, help them reinforce it, right? But the concept is diagonal cut, right? Just like straight and boxy. And the rook will have like these lines on top. So say, remember, like that, right? So you reinforce it. Okay. Then remember, what does the queen do? Which one is she? She's the one that's the combination of the rook and the bishop. Cool. So, and then we can, again, remember rays of sun. And we could, again, stick like a knight, like, oh, what if the knight goes here? She can take, right? Stuff like that. Oh, and we'll actually, for those who are just learning chess, if you have me learning, we'll capture it, we'll land on the square and remove the knight. And then they might say, wait, so you kill the piece? I say, no, chess is a non-violent sport. We're not actually going to kill the piece. We're just going to take it as a POW, right? It's going to be our prisoner. And then it's going to go in the dungeon. It could come back the next game, right? Okay, no one actually dies. It's like Super Mario, right? You keep getting new lives. Okay. So then we move on to the king. Again, king, what do we say? We can say for, association, for some analogies, we can say it's a force field or a halo, around the king. Those are the ones that it covers, and it can go to any one of those, right? Okay, and then we get on to the knight. And remember, if you flip it upside down, which letter is it? It's an L, right? And then you say, and well, actually, it's interesting because it's turned, it's upside down, but that's the thing, because it doesn't matter. It goes in every single direction. And does it go from green to green? Say nope, then they'll be like, nope, it goes from green to white. And I guess there's a mathematical power behind that as well with odd squares, 2 and 1. I'll let a mathematician break that down. But yeah, you get into, I mean, every piece, the way I think every single piece, well, the entire chessboard represents a formula, right? So the pieces simply represent mathematics, right? And I'm not a mathematician, but you just talk with people about it. A lot of people are interested in math, but really, yeah, every single piece represents a formula effectively. And then, well, yeah, and then they are a variable, and then they're all connected. It's a huge formula, right? Okay, which is maybe almost solved. We're not quite there yet, I think. Maybe alpha 0 came very close. Okay, and then we have so we knight, and then back to our pawn, right? Trickiest one. How many does it move on the first? They say 2 or 1, right? And then after that, what do you become? You become a queen or anything you want. But you say usually you'll get a queen because she's the most powerful, right? And how do they capture each other again? Okay, let's say like this. Black moves, whatever, go this way. White goes twice. And what can we do? Well, they're facing off. Whoever's move it is, they can capture the other pawn if they want to. Capture them. And again, have them practice captures a few times as they go and say, okay, cool. Now you know how to play chess. Start playing. And then it's kind of like, just like on a computer, if you're playing on a computer, you won't be able to make illegal moves. Except for right here, because I have a board. I'll show you. I have a board editor open on leadchess.org. So I've been pulling, I have the screen share. I actually tried out Zoom for this. So I have this, a meeting of 1. Okay, so I have this opened up, right? And so I could just move the pieces around. And I was toying around too. You can toy around with these, with the different types of pieces. I thought, okay, this looks kind of like the real set, because then they have some funky ones too, like that one. That's kind of fun. I'm not sure if that would be the easiest to first understand how to play, or like this one. That's kind of cool looking too. But yeah, I mean, these are standard. But I'm like, look, actually, real chess pieces, they'll tend to have the diagonal cut, like a Staunton chess set. That's your classic, or others modeled off it, very similar. So again, something like this, kind of, don't like the contrast to like this, but this is more like what a real set looks like. But I thought the one that I found, I lost it now. But anyway, that has the idea, right? Because you have the queen that can look in all the with the dots, kind of like the crown, looking in all directions. Yeah, I lost track of it now. This is a little bit old-fashioned one. Yeah, you get the concept. So just remember, when you're talking about it, if you're teaching someone, I think it's useful to talk about the shapes. And so again, we talk. You see some geometry in the pieces themselves. You see the geometry across the board and how they move. Yeah, so you can, whatever people are interested in, you could just make it relatable. But hopefully, if you haven't learned and you happen to see that that wasn't too complicated, but again, the second time around, just kind of reviewed it. First time around, kind of talk more about the analogies and stuff. So yeah, let me know what you think. I mean, obviously, there's so many methods. I must have. It's kind of like I was thinking about like someone who, like Johnny Cash, who ended up, I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, or like Ed Sheeran, right, borrowed some other songs. But I mean, maybe it just came in their head and they thought it was theirs, right? Because they've heard it before. So like I'm sure, like for example, the order, I don't know if I've ever seen it in this order. I think it's just I like to do it that way, but maybe I've seen it that way from others. I've definitely, for example, from back side to side, I just attribute that to the woman in the back of the airplane as we were like waiting to go to the bathroom or something. And she told me about this thing. She's like, "Oh, you play chess? Yeah, we taught these songs in chess class. I loved it." Unfortunately I should have like recorded that to have all the other ones, but I do remember from backside to side. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully this thing from Zoom actually went on YouTube. So I'll find out shortly, and enjoy and let me know what you think. All right.